Welcome. My name is Jordan Hayden. I am a Barre City resident, and I'm also a campaign director and organizer at VPIRG, the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. Thank you. So, for those who are unfamiliar, VPIRG is the largest environmental, consumer, and advocacy organization in the state. We work to bring the voices of everyday Vermonters to the table, and we focus on some of our state's most critical issues, like our climate and environment, democracy, healthcare, consumer protection, civil rights, and a whole lot more. I am so honored to be here tonight and to serve as your MC. And we'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. We welcome you tonight to the Extreme Weather People's Hearing. Tonight we'll provide a platform for people in Vermont to share their experiences with increasingly dangerous and destructive weather. Our coalition of organizations put this event together because now, more than ever, we must draw attention to the human costs of extreme weather. In 2023, catastrophic floods devastated communities across our state. In 2024, that same date brought another round of destructive flooding, hitting Barre for a second time. And as a Barre City resident, along with so many in this room tonight, we experienced those impacts painfully and firsthand. Then in 2025, Vermonters, especially in the Northeast Kingdom, were again hit with severe storms and localized flooding on July 10th. This is not normal, and this story needs to be told again and again and again. So we're grateful to have you here today to help us bring attention to these important issues. Before we kick things off, I'd like to pass the mic to Aaron Pedikowski from Climate Action Campaign for a quick word.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Aaron Pedikowski. I'm with the Climate Action Campaign. Before we start with our official program, I have announcements about today's event. First off, I wanted to thank the Old Barre Labor Hall for hosting our event today. I also wanted to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsors who helped plan today's event, the Vermont Natural Resources Council, Vermont Conservation Voters, VPIRG, Vermont AFL-CIO, Vermont Sierra Club, and many, many organizations that helped out along the way who are here to help connect me to another testifier. So helpful to have you all, and thank you all for being here. I also wanted to thank and acknowledge our elected officials who were here with us, participating in the program and receiving testimony that evening. Thank you so much, Councilmember Gustin, State Senator Perchlik, State Senator Watson, U.S. Representative Balint, U.S. Senator Welch, and thank you also, Ethan Hinch, Senior Policy Advisor from Senator Bernie Sanders' team to be here today. Also joining us, in the audience, we have State House Rep Gina Galfetti, State House Rep Dave Soucy, State Senator Ann Cummings, State Rep Scott Campbell, State Rep Teddy Wazazak, and State Rep Dara Torre. Tori, thank you for being here, everyone. Lastly, I'd like to thank all the testifiers who'll be sharing their stories today. I'm so grateful for your bravery and your generosity to share your stories. It's been wonderful working with you all, and I'm so grateful to know you all. Can we get a round of applause for everybody help make this happen? Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Jordan.
All right, thank you, Aaron. So, as we enter into this space tonight, I would like to ask that we all commit to providing a respectful and supportive environment for our testifiers as well as our audience members. So, some of the testimony that will be shared tonight involves confronting difficulties that are still emotionally raw and can be overwhelming. So, let's demonstrate empathy and compassion for one another as we collectively face the challenge of climate-fueled extreme weather. On that note, we ask that you be present as a listener. So please silence your cell phones. If you need to text or make a call, we encourage you to step outside to do so. And please refrain from asking questions or interrupting the speakers during the program. With that, I am honored to present our first speaker of the evening, U.S. Senator Peter Welch.
Thank you. The organizers rightly are giving us 2 minutes so that we can hear from the testifiers. So I'll be really quick. We're going to be able to make a couple of comments at the end. But first of all, my heartfelt appreciation for the people of Barre in central Vermont. I mean, Becca, you and I were here on right after July 10th, 2023 and 2024. And the devastation in those communities, going and seeing a person whose house had been destroyed. They wondered what was going to happen. And the outpouring of support from Barre to the folks who were hit hard was enormous and inspiring. But that was trauma one. Trauma two was FEMA never giving you an answer on what the hell is going on. So we're trying to fix that because we have to have a FEMA where there's much more local control in making decisions about how to build back, and where you're going to have an opportunity to speak to officials and get a yes or a no sooner rather than later. The second thing I want to say, and so appreciate climate action and so appreciate every Vermonter here, it is truly bizarre that in Washington, D.C., there is denial that climate change exists. It's like we can't talk about what is happening to us in Barre, to us in Montpelier, to us in Vermont, and to us all around the country. And then on top of that, we have clean energy projects that sit on the desk of the Secretary of Interior. And these are big wind projects where billions of dollars have been invested, where they've gotten all their permits, and those are being denied the opportunity to go on. And then, because that's illegal, Trump is paying billions of dollars to keep clean energy, clean, affordable energy, clean energy off the grid. So there's two challenges for us. One, coming together as a community to reform FEMA. This happens again. Vermonters deserve better service. And number two, to fight back with a sense of urgency and commitment on the denial of climate change. There's solutions that are there within reach. It's political obstruction that is getting in the way. And now, the best part of my evening, I get to introduce the best congressperson in the whole United States Congress, and that is the former President Pro Tem of the Vermont Senate. That is our beloved Becca Balint.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Thank you, Peter. I am the luckiest member of Congress because I have two senators who I know I can work so well with, and that's a weight off my mind. And I gotta tell you, true story, the number of members of the House who will say to me, wow, your senators actually talk to you. I said, yes, not only do they talk to me, but we're in alignment because we all understand that the work that we do has to put Vermonters at the center every single time. And that's why we're here tonight, because there is no replacement for hearing directly from the people who are impacted, so that when I go into committee, in the Judiciary Committee or the Budget Committee, it's not theoretical. I can say to them, I heard from the people of Barre, Vermont. I heard from the people in Plainfield, Vermont, and let me tell you what they told me. And they can't argue with me about that. When you put people at the center, it deflates all of the bluster about whether climate change is real or not. It goes back to the problem solving. I want to echo what Senator Welch has said about FEMA. There's so much work that needs to be done there. But I also want to highlight something that is so disgusting that is happening in this moment. And that is, we have an administration that is picking winners and losers based on who they voted for in their state. People from so-called red districts are getting relief, and people who are from quote-unquote blue states are not. And you can see the charts are out there on the internet. You can see all of the ways in which he is prioritizing who's getting relief based on who you voted for. Well, in Vermont, it's not about party. We are showing up for every single Vermonter, regardless of who you voted for, whether you voted for us or not. We don't care. We don't care when you call our office. We don't ask you who you voted for. That's how it's supposed to be. And we need to get back to that. I'm so excited to be here tonight. And the last thing I want to say is I know from having served in the Senate how nervous people can get sitting in front of a group giving candid, honest testimony. It is not easy on the best of days and the best of times to give testimony, but when you are reliving a trauma that you have been through, it's an incredible gift that you're giving to the rest of us, that you're willing to do that because it helps us make better policy. So thank you so much. And I think now I get to introduce Ann Watson. Come on up. State Senator and former mayor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. It is so important that you all are here because climate matters, because our stories matter, and we need to tell them. One of the things that I am worried about moving forward, I mean, we have had so many climate-fueled events in central Vermont, and what I am worried about, among many other things, is that we develop a kind of amnesia, right? That we forget that these things impact our communities, our state, more broadly, in our country. And so I think it continues to be important that we elevate these stories. And I want to thank Becca, Senator Welch and Congresswoman Balint for being here and for understanding that climate change is real and it matters. And I'm so grateful for the work that you all do. And it continues to be important that we have people in elected office who understand that. So I'm gonna end it right there. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for the bravery ahead of time for all of those who are going to be sharing their stories. It matters so much. Thank you.
Thank you again so much, Senator and Congresswoman and Senator. So grateful to have you on this panel of receivers this evening, and we will be hearing from more of those folks later on. Could we give these folks another round of applause? All right, I think it's time to introduce our first round of testifiers. So if you are in group one, and you should know if you are, I ask that you please come to the front of the room at this time, and we will hand you a microphone. And if you do happen to be unaware, I'm told that your group number is on your name tag. So just take a peek at that if you can't remember your group number. All right, you're free to kick it off, and then we'll just pass it down the line, if that sounds good.
All right. Is it on? Yes. First, I just want to introduce myself. I'm David Zuckerman. I'm here primarily as a farmer because that's what I'm doing full time these days. But some of you may be familiar that I used to be lieutenant governor and I was a legislator long before that. But I did bring some cherry tomatoes, and a number of you got to snack, but there's enough for each of our delegation here to have one if they want to take one and pass it down. I'm going to speak primarily as a farmer, but I will start with some of my experience as lieutenant governor during those difficult years of the major floods. And first, of course, my heart goes out to the members of the Barre community as well as so many other communities across the state. As we all know, I don't have to retell the story. Everyone here knows it. But I really want to focus on the folks whose homes got completely washed out, which so often, not always, but so often were folks of really on the edge economic circumstances. And I think that's an important thread that needs to be woven through climate change and the impacts of climate change is those that can least afford it are going to get impacted the most. And so I wanted to reference that with respect to the flooding. And again, it wasn't solely those who are working class, but it really is disproportionate. And as we all know in this room, the realities of our personal decisions make a huge impact. But frankly, the ability at the federal and the state level to make policy changes dwarf what any one of us can do individually, and we all need to be doing everything. The moment we're in now, the war in Iran has revealed so much. China has built 15,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, and in our own country, I don't think we've barely got 1 or 2 miles built. Other countries around the world are so far ahead of us with respect to planning for the future and living for the future. So I just want to say also that we're not an island in Vermont to the political discord that Representative Balint just spoke about and the insanity. When I was lieutenant governor during the biggest floods in 23 and 24, when I called the governor's office to say, I'm ready to stand with you, partisanship, parties don't matter, how can I help? They said, we've got this. You don't need to be a part of our press conferences. You don't need to be a part of events that we go to. So I say that, and I want to point out, I did not say it at the time. And there was a reason I didn't say it at the time. Because at that time, it wasn't about pointing out political differences. It was about making sure that most could get done that could get done. But now that I'm free from that yoke, I'm saying it. One of the things that like that, and the pandemic was the same way, is you would think these things would bring us all together. I came and mucked basements in Barre and so forth. And I'm going to skip along because I already talked about the economic circumstances, but I do want to talk about farming. And I can't speak overwhelmingly for dairy farmers. I hope we have some. I assume we do. But I do remember as a legislator years ago, dairy farmers saying, well, we might get a 4th cut of hay, so it's not all bad. I think that was some of them. But I think we'll hear from farmers some of the issues, including when it gets too hot, dairy cows don't produce as much milk. But I'm going to go into diversified farming. And I started in the Intervale in Burlington. And my wife and I left the Intervale in 2008 because we'd already been starting to get flooded. And last year and this year, the Intervale Community Farm, which is the hallmark farm of the Intervale, has rented land from me in Heinsberg because they don't trust that they can grow their long season crops anymore. So their onions and their winter squash and their potatoes are on my fields in Heinsberg because they're trying to insure against the flooding. And they're now buying land in Colchester. But I want to talk about a few things. We did not flood in Heinsberg. But in those wet years, we also died by 1,000 cuts. Diseases are worse on your crops. The watermelons that I wanted to pick, I realized as I sold them, when people cut them and took them home, they turned into mush. They were water inside. They weren't watermelons anymore. Melons, crops died like crazy, not by flooding. I've been told to wrap, but he did say I could grab an extra minute, so I'm going to grab it. Warmer winters also mean worse pests. As an organic farmer, some of those pests used to die in the cold soil, far distant south of us. That distance is shrinking, so they arrive sooner when the plants are younger, they're not as robust, they can't fend off for themselves. So there's these things that you might not realize are happening that are. So I'll end with a plea to our elected officials in the room and beyond, that as we fight to change our policies for the better for all of our lives and for your farmers and everything else, that you take into consideration, and I know this is true of pretty much everybody I know on this panel, that economic considerations are taken into play, and that those that can most afford to help us out of this situations are the ones that are asked to help us do it, because working people can't take anymore. We know that, and yet we all need these changes to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Geiger, and I live on the Great Brook in Plainfield Village with my husband, Peter Young, and our cat, Furman. Our house and yard sustained serious damage in the floods on July 10th, 2023 and July 10th, 2024. In 2024, the Mill Street Bridge, which is just downstream from our house, backed up with debris, mobile homes, logs, and more. We learned later that 1,000 trees floated down the brook that night. The jam created a lake my husband calls it a lake, I call it a tsunami, that backed up at our house, breaking our basement window, depositing 8 feet of silt, sand, and water. The flood destroyed our yard, our heating system, our Tesla batteries, our basement and storage rooms, hot water system, propane tanks, and more. The force of the water coming into the house threw our pool table across the room. It's a good thing we didn't decide to go check on the basement or we'd both be dead. We ran out of the house and the water was up to our knees in the road. Thankfully, we were able to drive out of the village and spend the night with friends. We're still digging out from the flood and repairing our house. Our dear neighbors and friends suffered much more. Many of them lost everything, including cats, cars, furniture, beloved heirlooms, along with the roofs over their heads. And they continue to wait, as Senator Welch alluded to, for their FEMA buyouts in limbo with housing, finances, and plans. Our town has pulled together. Our select board, public servants, and volunteers have worked tirelessly over 2 years on reimbursements, grants, roads, water, sewers, trying to get 12 bridges that were destroyed in Plainfield repaired. It is demoralizing and depressing that FEMA buyouts are so slow and our neighbors are still waiting for relief. If Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro could rebuild a major bridge and a collapsed section of I-95 in 12 days by speed walking through regulations, why can't FEMA move faster? I know that Senator Welch introduced legislation to reform FEMA. If anything should be bipartisan, it is a fast and efficient FEMA. We deserve better, and we need FEMA to be functional and effective as we continue to experience more disasters due to climate change. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Bond. I'm the co-executive director of Good Samaritan Haven, a homeless shelter network serving central Vermont. We operate 4 shelters and 81 beds, serving roughly 600 people annually in this region. And we've been serving the community proudly for 40 years this year. As a shelter operator, here are some snippets of my experience evacuating 55 shelter guests and staff during both the 2023 and 24 floods from 2 Good Sam shelters, which are located one in the floodway and one in the flood zone. How do you move 36 people quickly when water is already too high to get out by car? School bus called in for transport, water already up to its underbelly. The first shelter wasn't prepared to receive us. Told at 11:30 p.m. we needed to drive to the Barre auditorium, even though it was fast becoming cut off from the rising floodwaters. Texting my family that I love them in case we didn't make it across town alive. The bus took the last open route into Barre City. 30 minutes later, the river had swallowed up that inroad as well. Reunited with 19 more shelter guests and staff at the Red Cross shelter. We remained there for the next 3 days together. Some guests paced for 72 hours straight. One guest sat in a folding chair in a catatonic state for 3 days until he got back to his own shelter bed. Terrified guests without access to lifeline medications because all pharmacies and clinics were shuttered. Thank you for not leaving us. Thank you for not abandoning us. You could have gone home. Guests kept saying to me. They keep saying that to me to this day, but I wouldn't have done anything different. Over the last 3 years, Good Samaritan Haven has made an organizational commitment to site any future or existing shelters outside of flood-prone areas. This is a matter of social and environmental justice for us. We sustained around $100,000 in property damage, including our transport van, which was swept away with floodwaters as we were trying to evacuate various people back and forth to the auditorium. We spent hundreds of hours trying to access FEMA funds for damages, and it was unsuccessful. Instead, we were fortunate to receive a community development block grant, disaster relief grant, to relocate our Barre City shelter outside of the floodway. That shelter has been there for 40 years. This is a major step towards environmental justice for our most vulnerable neighbors who shouldn't be in the most prone locations that are, facing environmental situations like this. But until that project happens, we have spray painted a ruler on the brook wall to help us know when and how fast the brook is rising so that we have enough time to evacuate guests safely. Thank you.
Just going to stand up. It's a laser for me to talk. My name is Arian Tabumri, and I owned a building called the Heartbreak Hotel in Plainfield. Some of you folks may have seen photos. It's an 8-unit apartment building that got ripped apart in the flood of 2024. There were about 2/3 of the building completely disappeared in about 1 minute. And as Lauren alluded to, there was a bridge that backed up in town. And when that bridge finally let go, part of the bridge came down with a retaining wall and just bulldozed the entire foundation of the building and carried it down the river. And to be clear, I did not live there, and I'm thankful for that. But obviously, I'm sure like everyone else here, heart really goes out and still goes out to the folks who lived in that building. Many of them, they thought they'd be back the next day. They took their to-go bag. Some people left the keys for their vehicle on the counter because they rode with somebody else, and the car stayed there because the keys went away with the building. Luckily, no one lost their life, but 5 cats. People left some of their pets because, again, they took their to-go bag and they thought they'd be back. The year before, we had 2 feet of water in the basement, and that was a real thing. The building originally built in 1880, so it's seen quite a few years of flooding over the years, including the Great Flood of 1927 that we all hear about. And 2 feet of water hauled a bunch of miscellaneous supplies and building materials to the dump and said, okay, if the 100-year flood is now the 10-year flood, we can adapt, we can deal with this. And then the next year, 2/3 of the building disappeared. So the order of magnitude of change, at least I can't help but be impressed by that. And I think we all should take note for some of those things. And, just the night that it happened, I received a phone call from a tenant, Margie, at about 9:30 at night. And she said, Arian, the building's gone. And I said, what do you mean gone? She said, I can see the lights on the house on the other side. There's nothing there. And so she said it was in the dark and there was just a horrible sound, and all of a sudden it was gone. So it's a really, it's a powerful thing when that happens. We all have our sort of ways of processing grief and, eventually arriving at acceptance. And dealing with something as powerful as flooding, I think we realize quickly that there's limited what we can do. There's a certain amount of acceptance that we just have to live with, because we're not gonna, install an Army Corps flood control dam in Plainfield to save the village. This would sort of be, not only would be incredibly expensive, but perhaps a little crazy. But one thing that we can do, and this is a project that we're working on in Plainfield, and is build out of the floodplain. And so there's a group of us in Plainfield. Some folks may have heard of it. It's called the East Village Expansion. And we are immediately adjacent to the town, tied into municipal water and sewer, tied into roads. You can see it from the village. You can walk there. It's across the street from the park and ride. We're building 40 to 50 feet higher, depending on how you measure it. And we're clearly out of the floodplain. And I think as we look at historic settlement patterns in Vermont, a lot of villages settled around mills. Surprise, surprise, the mills were all next to the river. And so a lot of our villages, including Plainfield, which is the confluence of 2 rivers, are in the floodplain. If you look at the state river corridors map that some of you may be familiar with more than the floodplain map, almost all of Plainfield Village is in it. So we need to, what we can do on a positive note is get out of the way, build out of the floodplain. And just in regard, so I'm very optimistic about that. We've got looking at 20 housing units that we can put there. We've received a community development block grant, disaster recovery, which thanks to HUD and federal funds, and that's great to put in the infrastructure for that. We hope other people can do that as well. I would say on another policy note, things we can do to facilitate development of downtowns, as the legislature has done with Act 181, as is currently being contemplated with wetland rules reform. We have to analyze trade-offs, and surely housing is a noble trade-off in certain circumstances. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Melissa Whitaker, and myself and my husband Carlo were the founders and owners of Positive Pie in Plainfield, Montpelier, Hardwick, and at one time in Barre. And we basically lost our business. It's still open, but we had to sell them through what happened in the flooding. So we owned them for 26 years and had been through a couple floods, but our building in Montpelier was 2-leveled and a really big building. The bottom, the basement, we had a working prep kitchen, offices, storage, employee break room. And we had a 5-foot tall floor, subfloor, and a pump system. So in the Irene storms in 2011, that was able to keep up with it and keep the flooding mostly out of the basement. Obviously, in the 2023 storm, that did nothing. And we couldn't get things out. The whole building, flooded. The first floor flooded 3.5 feet as well. And it was basically a total loss of the building. The only thing that didn't need to be gutted and rebought was the top of the walls and the ceiling. And so we did get a couple rounds of BGAP grants. We got $130,000 of insurance, but the rebuild costs $850,000. And I kept asking for more money, and I just feel like we kind of fell through the cracks because of a few things. Number one, the space was so big. A lot of Montpelier business owners had smaller spaces, and the BGAP money was enough for them to get back open and have enough to fund them. Another thing a lot of the other businesses had was a landlord who helped fund the costs. We owned the building space, so everything was on us. And then a few other spaces in Montpelier that were our size were like Aubuchon, Walgreens. They have corporations that help fund them. We're just a family-owned business. So with the money we got, we had to take out a $500,000 loan and put our house up as collateral, which we chose to do because this is my husband's entire family business. It was our passion. It was our nest egg to be our retirement. We love running the restaurants. I was in there all the time. And I also really have very close relationships with my employees. And I just couldn't imagine my employees not having work. So I'm like, we're going to take the $500,000 loan. We're going to rebuild. We're going to bring them back. Most of my employees waited. It took us 8 months to rebuild because it was such a big project. The other problem that we went through was when we were granted the SBA funding, which was the $500,000 loan, was pretty early on, but it took 8 months to actually receive the funding. And we're trying to rebuild. We're trying to keep our employees. So we bought a food truck to run out front, which was a total loss of money. And we had to keep funding that to keep our employees and to keep our customers. And we had to put our house up as collateral. And the whole time we're thinking it's probably going to flood again. So it was just very nerve-wracking. My husband and I literally didn't sleep for months. Like, my nervous system was a mess. I had to take medicines to sleep. It was horrible to go through. And then we got back open in April. We were having a great summer in Montpelier, which kind of gave us hope. But then July 10th the next year, Plainfield flooded. And the building itself only sustained minimal damage, but nobody came to Plainfield for business because all the bridges were closed down. You couldn't get to Plainfield. So we did not make money. So Montpelier was then having to fund Plainfield, and we got more behind. And then there was a big construction project in front of Montpelier the next spring. And so we were drowning. So that winter, we had to take out 2 high interest loans to pay payroll, and we just couldn't come out of it. We couldn't do it. And I thought we were going to go bankrupt. We employed between all 3 places 100 people. I didn't want them to lose their jobs, so we put them for sale. I feel very fortunate that we found a buyer. They're still open. Most of my employees, honestly, are still working there. I feel really grateful for that. But for Carlo and I, it's been really tough. We walked away still owing some people money. And we had to start over in our 50s. And my husband owned an excavator. He started an excavation company in Plainfield, made enough to get us through the summer, but couldn't make it through winter, so we've had to move to Nashville. It's not been the worst thing in the world, but I feel really lucky we got to come back here for the summer. And being back in Vermont this summer, I am so happy to be here. And I'm so sad that we've had to leave this area and our community, and this has just been our fate. We're making the best of it. I'm really thankful my husband was able to make money doing something else. I hope to be full-time in Vermont again, but it's not been easy for us. And the main reason I want to speak out is because I don't want other people to go through what we've had to go through. The mental stress and what we've had to, the resilience we've had to have is crazy. I don't want other people to go through that. I want people to get funded without having to take out a $500,000 loan, without having to put their house up as collateral. If they have to take out a loan, make it quick and easy and not a mountain of paperwork and 8 months to get the funding. All of that just added up to crazy stress. And since this happened, I've spoken out twice. I went to the climate crisis panel in New York City, and I want to just say quickly that part of that was asking big oil and fossil fuels to help fund the cleanups, which I think is a really freaking good idea. Because I know part of the problem is Vermont didn't have money. Vermont didn't have the money to fund all of us. That's why I fell through the cracks. There probably wasn't enough. But why does it have to fall on citizens? Why does it have to fall on people? Big oil are causing the pollution. Attribution science shows that most of the pollution comes from fossil fuel and big oil. They can pay. They can pay for us to clean up. So that is where some of the money can come from. And I don't know how many of you know, but Vermont was the first state to pass the Super Climate Fund Bill. Vermont is suing big oil. It's in the Supreme Court right now. I am so happy that that's happened. My speaking out, I think, is, kind of helped part of that. And I'm really, really proud. I have had people come up to me and just say that is just so amazing. And other legislatures are looking at that, and other states are considering also putting that on the books. And the second thing I want to say is that I also last week or 2 weeks ago went to Washington, D.C. with Deirdre to speak with 75 to 100 other survivors around the country of people who lost their homes or businesses. And all of them have the same story. They're not getting enough funding. If they are getting funding, it's coming years down the road, which is so stressful. And they're not even getting enough governmental help for cleanup. It's all on the citizens' backs. It's all volunteers in the community. Thank God for the volunteers in the community, which was such a saving grace for Carlo and I. A whole month, people showed up and helped us clean out. I mean, that was such an amazing gift. But why is it all on the people, on the communities? And so I just want better policies. I want different ways of funding this so it's not falling on people. And the very last small thing I'm going to say is, while I was in DC 2 weeks ago with 100 other survivors who are all still trying to figure out how to get rehoused, how to get their businesses back open, some of them from the LA fires, it's now been 2 years, they still aren't back in their homes. It's just so frustrating to hear everyone's stories and hear such a lack of real support. And this is going to happen more and more and more. So we need to talk about it. We need to make sure that we're changing the policies. We need to make sure people are getting better support, better funding. And the last piece I want to say is, while we were there, it was when the president spent, I think it ended up being $14 million to paint the pool in front of the mall blue for the 4th of July or 3rd of July, whatever. That is funding that could have went to these survivors who still don't have homes. That pisses me off, and we need to talk about that and do better. The funding is there. It just needs to be used right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your powerful words and stories and work that you've been doing. It truly does make a difference. You may now return to your seats. Can we give our testifiers one more round of applause? Thank you again. Group 2, I now welcome you to the front of the room. Again, you have a number on your little card, so feel free to check that out if you need a reminder.
Hello, my name is Sandy Enman. Our family owns Sleepy Hollow Inn Ski and Bike Center, 800-acre parcel located in Huntington. The affected portion of our business established in the year 2000 is cross-country skiing and lodging. Initially, we did not need any snowmaking or air conditioning in our lodge. Over time, we've now installed snowmaking along 3 kilometers of our trail system with 130 kilowatts of solar panels to offset most of the electrical costs. Additionally, we have purchased one of 2 electric large snow groomers in the United States. And again, the cost of that was $500,000, by the way. These machines, oh, sorry. Should I repeat? Are we good? Okay. These machines have a useful life of 20 years. And I couldn't bring myself to purchase another one that used fossil fuels. Other electric equipment that we have in our business is we have an electric pickup truck, lawnmowers, and a skid steer. We've also installed heat pumps for cooling and heating in the lodge. There are 3 electric level 2 charging stations in our parking lot, and our family owns 5 electric vehicles. An example of the specific regulatory issues in Vermont is the costly delays by the Public Utility Commission on approving installation of solar panels. You've had trouble too? Our submission was complete this last round of solar panels we purchased. Our submission was complete in September 2022, and they put our request on stay for over a year with final approval in December 15th, 2023. And of course, it's the winter, so you have to wait till spring to put your solar panels in. This resulted in we couldn't install them until calendar year 2024. We were not the only project that was affected by this stay. This delay cost our business $15,000 in extra electricity that we would have been able to generate ourselves if we had the solar panels installed. A cost that would not have been incurred if the Public Utility Commission had issued the permit in a timely manner. There was also a delay for us in taking the federal solar credit for 2 years, and that credit was worth $17,800. The financial impact of the ski industry in Vermont and New England is significant. We need more infrastructure and incentives to reduce the fossil fuel consumption. I refer you to read No Good Reason, Vermont's regulatory roadblocks to renewable energy and our fight against climate change. Folks say to me, we can just simply make more snow. The temperature needs to be around 26 degrees for this to work. You're shaking your head, yeah. And a lot of people, even the people that ski at our place, don't understand that at all. They talk about Catamount, which is near us, which is lower elevation. Well, we'll just put snowmaking in there. It has to be colder, or you can't make snow, you make water. My father was a science teacher. He was my science teacher when I was in 7th grade. That was kind of embarrassing. But I still recall him telling us in science class, we will run out of fossil fuels. This is, we've known this for a long time. As you are aware, climate change is real and we have no planet 2. Every day, the Earth receives 10,000 times more energy from the sun than it uses. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Deirdre Michelle, and I live on the north end of Barre in the city. I was surrounded by the flooding during the first floods, and I went out and I helped muck out people's basements, and I helped all I could. But then I realized there was more I could do for my city than just do grunt work. And I was inspired to tell the stories of my neighbors and those around me through a painting series that I created. And I worked with Shaun W, who is also a community member and activist in Barre. And we created 24 portraits that are in a
80 by 80 painting, along with poems and lessons that you can read, telling the stories of my neighbors. I feel that if somebody can find themselves in the paintings and find themselves in the stories that we tell of people who have been, or who are survivors of the floods, then they can care. And when we care, then we'll do something. So we have to care first before we can take action. So I thought giving my city this way to help us care about each other and to catalog the stories for the history, because the floods are not going to stop. And we need to be prepared and we need to make decisions. I'm going to read now because I totally got off thing. Barre is an exceptional city. Neighbors have risen up to help their neighbors. The City Council is exploring with open eyes the ways that climate change is asking them to build for the future. We are having conversations like we are right now as to what we need to do now, knowing that we will not likely have seen the end of flooding in our city. Barre City is 4 square miles? We can't build out of the flood zone. We can't build out of the floodway. It's the city. This is all we got. So how do we make it safe for everybody? But Barre is not the only community facing the dangers of an ever-changing climate. Protect the EPA and NOAA so that we can soften and work to eliminate the conditions that create more extreme weather. Restructure FEMA so that it puts more power in the hands of states, cities, and towns, getting more direct help to the citizens. Restructure the buyout system within FEMA so that communities can remain viably fiscal while caring for their people, which is like the most frustrating issue that I've watched when getting to know the people tell the stories of their loss within the city, and the city also trying to struggle with supporting people, but the buyout system won't allow the things to, the sale of the houses to ever be used again as a tax revenue for the city. And we're already struggling to pay for our school and to fix our roads. So how can we lose more tax revenue? We must push back against the federal reversal of the environmental protections we deserve and need. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Robert Arison. I'm a primary care physician in Richmond, Vermont, where I work as part of an independent clinic that was started 14 years ago. We care, as some of you may be aware, for infants several days old, literally all the way up through a few centennials living in the community and nearby assisted living facility. I'm here, as we all are, to discuss the impact of climate change on my practice and its patients. I remain deeply concerned, as I've heard echoed several times, about our administration's ongoing denial of the seriousness of our shared situation. Though many have already spoken to the impact of flooding in our towns, I hope to provide a slightly different perspective. In both 2023 and in 2024, to the date, as we all recall, my clinic was almost completely inaccessible for several days at a time, with access cut off as the water lapped at the edges of Route 89, across nearby Route 2, and over the surrounding farmlands. Alternative dirt roads were impassable, and for the majority of our patients and to many of our 17 staff and 7 providers, the clinic was literally an island on an island. Despite this, I had an elderly diabetic patient, ill-equipped to do so, I'll add, park his car on Route 89 shoulder and clamber down the embankment through the woods to his appointment. Another walked up the hill from a remote parking location, and in so doing, literally provoked the early signs of what subsequently proved to be a blockage of one of his coronary arteries. It'd be easy to assume that a few days of missed appointments might be a relatively small bump in the road, but also consider that my clinic has a state-approved vaccine refrigerator with strict temperature parameters containing immunizations for babies, at-risk adults, and the general population. On any given day, our work is not just the people we see in person, it's the thousands, literally, of phone calls our staff manages and the prescriptions that we refill for people such as those in the room here tonight. It's the telemedicine services we offer, the home visits we provide, the home health orders we sign, the countless prior authorizations that we push through for essential medications, and the time-sensitive care that extends far beyond the walls of the clinic. It hardly needs highlighting that primary care is a limited resource in Vermont and throughout the country. As demonstrated over the last few years, severe climate events quickly push our ability to provide reliable, high-quality care to our 6,300 patients beyond its capacity. The cascade of events snowballs astonishingly quickly and affects absolutely everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Group 2. We so appreciate your remarks. I think we know what to do, right? Thanks again. Group 3, I now welcome you to the front of the room.
Hi, my name is Corinne Cooper. Corinne from Berlin. I've lived in Berlin for decades, and I've worn many hats in town over the years. Disaster response must become faster, more coordinated, more compassionate, and better tailored to the unique needs of mobile home communities. I know because in 2023, I was one of the newer residents at the Berlin Mobile Home Park. That's the one behind CVS. 2 miles away was River Run Manor, another Berlin mobile home community devastated by the May 2011 flood. Within weeks of being warned that our park was at risk of flooding from people working on a rivers program at the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, both communities flooded on July 10th, 2023. Although emergency crews went door to door, not everyone evacuated immediately. 2 homes required swift water rescues. Many residents spent the night in their cars as they feared leaving them unattended. The only entrance of our park became a deep crater. We were not allowed back until Friday, July 14th. During that time, our only information was a drone video taken by a Berlin resident showing high water. We received no guidance regarding the sewage hazards, mold, or mildew. Going in, the sewage smell was overwhelming. Everybody lost their homes in both of the parks. That's 40 families total. Some lost absolutely everything, while others were able to salvage some belongings. Not everybody had flood insurance. It was 3 weeks before we received guidance on how to save photos, and by then, they were already in the debris pile. There were mixed messages about debris removal. The park owner insisted we continue to pay him lot rent until the mobile homes were removed from the park. A friend of the park owners bought some of the mobile homes. And even when some of us turned our homes over to the state, there were still problems with them being removed. And somewhere in there, most people's fuel tanks were taken. Colleagues, family, and friends helped me get my stuff out and gave me a place to stay. I focused on connecting with residents of both parks so we could share information and support each other. Unfortunately, it wasn't just emails. We're talking there needed to be family members involved to get information around. There needed to be phone calls. I even printed out stuff and brought it places so people could all be informed. Another resident created a Facebook page that became an important communication tool. Again, it wasn't all the residents. Sometimes it was their family members trying to keep tabs on what was happening. Because of the tropical storm Irene, which devastated Weston's mobile home park, also in Berlin, I knew Kelly Hamshaw at UVM and Joellen Calderera, and they were incredibly helpful, as was CVOEO, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. We had very little direct support on the ground from the town or state during those first days. I reached out to our representative, and she came to take a look when we first got back in that Friday. Reporters came and found us. Red Cross offered immediate funds to make sure people could buy some food and clothing. Local property tax abatement hearings didn't happen until September. I'm still not sure why. Meanwhile, residents, some of them paid their property taxes to be sure to avoid late fees and penalties. FEMA provided important assistance, and that support should continue, but the system is difficult to navigate, and I'm sure most of you know that. Staff repeatedly suggested relocating to places such as Springfield and Starksboro, without understanding it would not only be a long commute to my Berlin job, but it would take me from my family and support network where I needed to search for a new home. FEMA's temporary housing plans were delayed for months, and then they pulled the plug on the project, with Montpelier still receiving over $500,000, and the park people struggled on. I was crushed when, after making a full price offer on a home in Berlin in September of 2024, the owners decided they weren't ready to sell. I was then shocked to learn that in addition to paying $1,106 fair market value for the direct lease apartment FEMA found for me, they would begin charging an additional $1,656 per month penalty because I hadn't found permanent housing. A friend's efficiency opened up, and so I moved a fourth time. Neither FEMA nor SBA seemed to look at my case history before calling me, which was really frustrating. SBA advised working with a local lender for financing, since going through their program takes months. That was them saying that. When I finally purchased a stick-built house last fall with local funding, SBA's paperwork still required me to certify that the funds were used for purchasing a mobile home. When I pointed that out, that I had bought a house, which they knew was my plan all along, I was told that the paperwork couldn't be changed. I refused to sign it, and my case was closed, and I can't tell you how disappointing that was, because that was months and years of jumping hoops to get there. Anyway, based on our experience, there is much work to do. Future flooding needs to be prevented where possible, improve emergency communication, and provide local case management quickly. It was months. Reduce unnecessary bureaucracy, protect disaster victims from exploitation, expand affordable housing options, and recognize that recovery lasts years, not just months. Everybody found somewhere to land, but often not where they wanted to. Affordable options were and continue to be scarce. A gentleman and his wife took out a 30-year mortgage to get a house. Now that may not sound surprising, but he was 90 years old, and he's still kicking. One person landed in a town 35 miles away in order to get into an ADA-compliant apartment. At least 2 families moved out of state. An elderly lady who had lived in the park for decades was not able to die at home as she had wanted to. Sadly, we've lost 3 people since the flooding. And I say we because it still feels like my community. So 3 years later, I still worry every time heavy rain is forecast. I wonder whether roads will wash out, bridges will become impassable, and whether I'll be able to get home. I live on a hill now. Disasters don't end when the water recedes. They reshape lives for years. There needs to be funding, there needs to be action, and above all, there needs to be compassion. And something I didn't mention is one of the reasons it took me so long to find a house wasn't just the incredible prices. It's because most of the houses that were coming on the market were by the rivers. And guess where I didn't want to live?
Good evening. My name is Jessie Lisey, and I'm here to share some of my recent experiences as an infectious disease doctor in central Vermont. We know that there are a lot of ticks in Vermont. Most people have heard of Lyme disease, but with the warming temperatures and milder winters that we already heard about, the deer tick populations have exploded. especially this year. This is the worst year of ticks that we have ever had. As a result, we now have other tick-borne diseases, such as babesiosis, which can cause anemia and recurrent fevers, similar to malaria. We are also seeing the northward spread of diseases such as Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which can be fatal. Similarly, the Lone Star tick has been inching northward with warming temperatures. This tick carries ehrlichiosis, Heartland virus, and can cause alpha-gal syndrome, which is the red meat allergy. In addition to ticks, the mosquito populations have increased, related to warming temperatures and standing water with flooding. Each year, we see more cases of West Nile virus, Eastern equine encephalitis, and Jamestown Canyon virus. These diseases can cause permanent brain damage or death. Like ticks, there are different species of mosquitoes, and according to surveillance reports from the Department of Health, the mosquito species that transmits Zika, dengue, and yellow fever is now considered established in southern Vermont. These are diseases that most people associate with tropical climates, not New England. We have also seen severe bacterial infections related to flooding. In the weeks following the July 2023 and 2024 floods, I saw several patients with severe skin infections of their feet and legs because they had been walking in the floodwater or assisting in cleanup efforts. Treating these infections can require multiple antibiotics, including intravenous, as well as causing significant tissue damage, needing multiple surgeries and long hospital stays. The Trump administration's claim that climate change doesn't hurt people is dangerous. Vermonters are already living the climate crisis, and if we continue on our current path, more people will suffer and die needlessly.
Hello, my name is Katie Swick, and I'm a kindergarten teacher in Montpelier. And I also had a house in Montpelier that flooded in 2023 and 2024. This 1860s house will no longer be flooding because it has now been torn down. Maybe I'm lucky I've gotten the buyout at this point and in a new home. But it was a forced decision because the house was no longer considered historic, so I had to make the decision to either raise it up or tear it down. And I needed to get my children into a home as soon as possible. So the house has been torn down. And for months I couldn't even drive by the site. I'm still, after 3 years after the flood, I still have daily reminders. I'm not living in my community of Montpelier anymore. After 15 years, I had to buy a house outside of town. So it's still, even though I'm considered settled in my house, the impact's still there. 3 years ago this week, I was diligently watching the weather, the river right off my deck. It was a gorgeous spot. But I slowly started packing because I was watching the water come up. And then on the 10th, my basement started filling up with water. And I was not slowly packing, but I was in overdrive packing when I could. And at 4:30 on the 10th, I left my house for the last time, not knowing I wouldn't be back to live there again. The next morning on the 11th, I came down over the hill, Cliff Street, and looked down at the river surrounding my house. I found a friend and we canoed up to my house. The water was still at the porch level, and we went inside and saw the damage. It had been 3 feet minimal in the house of water and mud. The river had come into my house, and my house had been in the river. Just because extreme weather events brings out the resiliency in Vermonters, it doesn't mean that we can continue to handle the financial and mental impact of extreme weather, the trauma on individuals, businesses, and communities. I continued to show up every day, and I persisted hard for days and weeks and months cleaning. I lived off adrenaline and the love of family, friends, and the community of Vermont helping me. And then I had to deal with FEMA, and that is when the disaster felt like the disaster more than anything. I felt like the disaster because of FEMA shit. The shit you have to go through to get what you need from FEMA, if you're lucky to get what you don't. You never really get what you need. And I'm also really sad that my children had to live through an extreme weather event that they have had already to deal with the impact firsthand of climate change. I am angry that I've spent my life educating others and doing what I can individually to stop climate change, and yet we continue to have leaders that are supporting corporations causing damage to our lives and our climate. The floods have reminded us that residents in Vermont are resilient and we show up after disasters, but that's not enough. We need more local, state, and federal monies plan. We need prevention, we need preparation, and we need faster recovery for people so that the trauma is minimal as possible and it keeps people living in Vermont. We don't want to lose our citizens here. And we absolutely need federal, state, and local to help us, citizens of this country, fight the impact of the greediness of corporations on our planet and our children's future. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Barre. My name's Nicholas. I'm the city manager here, and I'm going to speak a little bit about just the aftermath, the recovery, the challenges that we go through on the municipal level. I think you've heard from a lot of people here tonight who spoke very eloquently about why the recovery process isn't good for individuals. It's also not good for municipalities. One part of it is on the FEMA side that it basically supports and is built on a construct of building back what was there when what was there might not be what we want to build back. Just give you a really silly example. We used to have carpeting in the city hall basement offices that flooded, and FEMA would pay for carpeting, but they wouldn't pay for laminate floor, which can be mocked, right? So that's just one very silly example. Once you get through that process, if you want to do mitigation, if you want to take on big projects like we do here in Barre, it becomes a Hunger Games, right? And I've mentioned this to our delegation a couple of times. I know they've done great work to try to address this, but we would in Barre gladly take $2 million in the bank as opposed to the opportunity to compete for 20. Because if we can it's hard to cobble together money for projects, especially for small cities, and Barre still is a small city. Can't imagine what Plainfield has to go through. We don't have armies of grant writers, right? So cobbling together money for projects is tough. Gladly take money for one big project because then we can actually start to make a difference instead of we haven't really been able to do anything big because it's hard to put those projects together. So it's a Hunger Games for us. We don't want to be competing with Plainfield. We don't want to be competing with Montpelier. We just want some money to do some big projects. A lot of people have talked about the buyouts. I know it can be traumatic for the people who go through it. It's also traumatic for people who don't get it. And that was the case in Barre. We had many, there were 2-to-1 applications that we could not approve. And that means that there's people in homes that they don't feel comfortable in that flood, that they have no way out, right? And so for us in Barre, a lot of the people that got the buyouts were the lucky ones because they were able to find their way out of the situation they were in. My time is wrapping up, so I'll be really quick, but I just want to note that, resiliency and mitigation is going to be uncomfortable. We've gone through it in Barre. There's going to be a conflict between mitigation and convenience. If you follow our debates here locally, you know that removal of the Berlin Street Bridge is really controversial, even though it will have a huge impact on whether people get flooded or not. But people don't want to be inconvenienced by driving 20 seconds down the road to the Blackwell Street Bridge, right? And so we have to be ready to be inconvenienced with mitigation. That's just the way it is. I saw Peter Anthony here. We fought for years with Peter to remove a trestle bridge because it serves one corporation. One company is held by a trestle bridge that has flooded Peter's neighborhood and ended up in his buyout, right? And so the state didn't want to inconvenience one company at the expense of the health of an entire neighborhood. So we have to be ready for inconvenience, and because that's the only way to survive in these cities, especially like Barre, that are built around the rivers. So thank you.
Thank you, Group 3, for sharing such personal experiences. You may now return to your seats. Just a quick reminder to take care of yourselves if things are feeling a little bit heavy right now. These are difficult conversations to be having. All right, last but certainly not least, I welcome Group 4 to the front of the room.
Good evening, and thank you for showing up. Our august guests as well as the public. My name is Peter Anthony. I'm a former resident of the North End here in Barre. And as you may have heard from our city manager, I lost our house. I wanted to talk about two themes that are illustrated by a story about how we came to Barre. Marcia and I barely qualified for a low interest mortgage way back in the Carter administration. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, it's about 1978, long time ago. And one of the things that undergird my thematic approach to the discussion tonight is that the neighbors that we moved in the midst of, we were the newcomers. Several of those people had either been born in the house that was adjacent to the one we bought, or were there long enough that they were there longer than I was alive. And that was neighborhood, and that was extraordinarily important. They were the grandparents of our two children for many, many years. Our immediate families, Marcia's and mine, do not live around here. And so those neighbors were the surrogate family. So it was the web of humanity that was extraordinarily important and didn't survive the flood of 2023. The second theme is one that has to do with, in addition to a stable population, I think it's extremely important for people in this day and age to develop equity and savings. And I share that with Treasurer Pichek, by the way. We were fortunate enough to be able to afford our house, though only one of us had a full-time job. Well, as Nicholas said, I was fortunate to receive a buyout. The fact of the matter is, I can buy only a third of a house with the money I received. So frankly, that was cutting the legs out of what you would call financial progress over the 50 years that we were there. That is to say, as David Zuckerman mentioned, the fallout from this is both the destruction of a neighborhood, a web of humanity, but also the equity that people have and may not have other than their house that they live in. So those are really important, if you like, factors in weighing what climate policy should look like. Lastly, I have to say that without my friends and fellow Barreites, we would have never salvaged a lot of the stuff that we did. People took us in, helped us, allowed us to wash out cabinets and tables in their driveway, all that kind of stuff that, frankly, people shouldn't have to go for. Lastly, I think it's really unfortunate that the response by the state was so flaccid. We lived through Irene, different regime, if you like, in Montpelier, and the National Guard was on the end of the street within 48 hours. The National Guard never visited the north end of the city of Barre in 2023. So, frankly, just to remind you, the reason people created the Republic of Vermont was for collective security. And unfortunately, as time has gone on, that has been lost. So the folks who showed up did it on their own dime, which is wonderful. I'm truly grateful. But my state was not there to help me. My neighbors were. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rachel Van Vliet. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a middle school teacher in Barre, a proud member of this community, and president of the local union representing educators and support staff in the Barre Unified Union School District and the Central Vermont Career Center. As an educator, community member, and labor leader, I have seen firsthand how climate change is reshaping life in Barre. The severe flooding has impacted not only our students and their families, but also the educators who care for them every day. While helping students navigate these challenges, many educators are experiencing their own losses and uncertainty. We heard from Katie earlier about that. One colleague of mine spent her whole summer trying to care for her aging father while desperately searching for safe housing after his house was destroyed in the flooding. Another colleague lost her entire home in Plainfield the following summer. But today I want to talk about what this has looked like for my students. One of my former students already struggled with anxiety and relied on routine and predictability to feel safe. During the flooding, his world was turned upside down. He suddenly found himself wading through knee-high, muddy water to reach the Barre Auditorium, where he spent hours in a crowded shelter, uncertain about what would happen next. The floodwaters eventually receded, but the trauma did not. For months afterward, another student of mine asked me any time it rained, "Are we going to have to evacuate?" Their brain had learned to associate rain with danger, triggering a fight, flight, or freeze response. Instead of focusing on math or reading, they were focused on staying safe and surviving. This is what climate change looks like in Barre. It disrupts learning, it creates trauma, it steals the sense of safety every child deserves. At the same time, Barre schools are once again operating without an approved budget after repeated budget defeats. Too often, we respond to difficult challenges by prioritizing short-term cuts instead of long-term solutions. Whether we're talking about our school budgets or preparing our communities for climate change, we cannot keep choosing short-term savings over our children's future and the future of Barre. Barre deserves better. Our students deserve leaders who will take action, invest in their future, and make decisions that protect our communities for generations to come. I urge our many leaders in the room, our U.S. Senator and Representative, our state senators, representatives, city councilors, select board members, school board members, to remember this and take action, invest in our future, and make decisions that protect our communities for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Youngbear, and I am a resident of Washington County, Vermont. I say that because between 2011 and 2024, Washington County has the dubious distinction of having 22 federal disaster declarations, the highest rate and total of any county in the entire United States. This is due to a climate shift toward more frequent and stronger inland storms and the subsequent flooding that comes with it. In May of 2011, I was serving as the executive director of the People's Health and Wellness Clinic, located at that time in Barre's North End, directly in front of the Public Safety Building. That area is the lowest point in Barre City, and the severe storms caused massive flooding, destroying the clinic. We became a recipient of FEMA public assistance. While we were told that FEMA would cover 75% of costs, with our share being 25%, after reviewing allowable costs, the cost share was reversed, with us paying 75% and FEMA 25%. Another unknown cost at the time was FEMA's requirement to purchase and maintain flood insurance as a condition of keeping the funding. Little did we know that the rates would increase by 25% or more every year. 5 years later, we had paid more in flood insurance than we had received in FEMA assistance, and that cost would be ongoing. Thankfully, the clinic is now located to higher ground on Church Row. I am also a resident of the town of Plainfield. In 2023, our basement was flooded with 4 feet of water due to the July 10th storm, even though we are located at 1,100 feet elevation, 4 miles up out of the village. We were blessed with 2 days of volunteer assistance from the Southern Baptists and excellent and timely individual assistance from FEMA, which covered 75% of the cost of an automatic drainage and sump pump system that keeps our 200-year-old fieldstone foundation basement dry and allowed us to keep our house. That was a good experience with FEMA, and we are grateful for it. I am also currently the chair of the Plainfield Select Board. We continue to suffer from the long-term effects of the flooding of both the 2023 and 24 storms, 2024 being by far the worst for Plainfield. We have lost property, tax base, economic activity, and residents forced to move. In addition to the public assistance for repairs to roads, bridges, water, sewer infrastructure, and more, we have 4 properties in the FEMA Buyout Individual Assistance Program from 2023, only 1 of which has closed. We have 24 buyouts representing more units, because some of those are multiple unit apartment buildings, from 2024, still awaiting FEMA approval. We are also dealing with 6 bridges and hundreds of feet of major washouts over a 3-mile stretch of the Brook Road, which remains impassable. Estimated costs of repairs is $18 million, 10 times our total annual town budget. Clearly, FEMA needs funding and reform, as do the entities that help predict, prevent, and protect our citizens, the National Weather Service, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We know these weather events will continue, and they know no political boundaries. All American citizens deserve the protection and assistance that good science and good government can provide. Help us. Thank you.
My name is Amanda Andrews, and I think that I'm the last speaker tonight. And before I start on my prepared remarks, I can't let this night close without bringing up the fact that my partner is a Barre City firefighter. And no one has mentioned the support that first responders need, the equipment, the tools, the training, the personnel. I could spend my whole 2 minutes talking about how our first responders are on the front lines of this crisis. But I was invited here to speak tonight because I myself am the owner and operator of Tamarack Hollow Farm in Plainfield. 2026 marks my 17th season farming in our great state. I was here through Irene, and I was able to make it through these last few years thanks to our state's BGAP program, which provided financial assistance to businesses affected after the extreme weather events of 2023 and 2024. Vermont's scale of vegetable farms are not supported by federal crop insurance and disaster programs. By the state's formula, my losses in 2023 and 2024 were $113,640. I don't flood. I hold NAP insurance, the only USDA insurance for vegetable producers, and my combined payment for those 2 years of losses was $3,035, for which I waited 500 days. The funds I received from the state are what helped to close that $110,000 gap and have kept my businesses going. However, the BGAP program was a temporary response to a continuing threat, In order to provide farmers with a meaningful safety net and navigable aid process, nearly every agricultural service group in the state aligned to create the Farm and Forestry Security Special Fund, a bill which thankfully unanimously passed out of both houses and was signed by the governor, but remains unfunded at the close of this legislative session. Farmers face unfulfilled promises on the federal level as well. While the long-delayed NOP cost share program may finally reach farmers later this year, NOAA has been slashed, leaving us without fair warning of the extreme weather we're all facing. And both the EPA's policies and the Farm Bill seem designed to line the pockets of chemical and pesticide manufacturers that contribute to climate change, while removing all funding for the organic and regenerative farming practices that can sequester carbon and are driving young folks into rural communities. Without real solutions, without access to real science and real funding, Vermont's farmers won't be able to recover from these cycles of extreme weather much longer. It will further hollow out our rural communities, and that means the loss of school board members, first responders, and the responsible land stewards that feed our communities while protecting our soils, forests, and waterways. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for coming.
Hi everyone, my name is Yesha, and I just wanted to flag that you may have noticed that there would be two items on your chairs. There was the postcard that we want to send to members of Congress, because we know that your voices are really powerful, and we want to send members an opportunity across this community to send a really strong message to DC that our lives are not expendable. So if you could please take a moment to fill out the postcard, and then my colleague who's waving at the back of the room will collect those from you as you head out the door. The other is an invitation that looks like this to join our climate meeting that will be happening on July 21st at 5:30 p.m. And that's a virtual call to really just invite everyone here to talk about the campaign that we have kicking off. We know that it's too hot in summer, and we want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to join the campaign federally. So please also thank our amazing advocacy groups who are at the back, and they are local here. These are climate advocacy groups across Vermont who are doing amazing work. So please say hello to them, and thank you very much. I'll hand over back to the MC.
Thank you, Yesha. All right, before I pass it back over to the members of our federal delegation and others on our panel, I'd like to share a few words about our ongoing work to make big oil pay. After decades of fueling the climate crisis, misleading the public, and raking in enormous profits, fossil fuel companies and their allies are pushing legislation in Washington to shield big oil from legal accountability for the damages that they've caused. The bills are called the Stop Climate Shakedowns Act of 2026, H.R. 8330 in the House and S. 4340 in the Senate. These bills would do exactly what big oil wants: block communities from holding fossil fuel companies accountable in court, preempt state climate accountability laws like Vermont's Climate Superfund, and leave taxpayers to pay more while polluters pay less. So Senator Welch and Congresswoman Balint, tonight I would like to share with you the No Immunity for Big Oil letter of support. It has now received dozens of signatures from both local and national organizations, as well as over 50 Vermont state representatives and senators, Vermont's Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, and Treasurer, and an accompanying petition that has been signed by over 500 Vermonters. I'd like to thank you for your ongoing work in this space as we continue working to ensure polluters pay their fair share. I know you'll continue on in this fight with us, and on behalf of all of these signatories, I'd ask you to help lead the charge against this horrible legislation. And so now I present to you the letter of support and petition. Thank you both again so much for your work, and we will be passing these materials along to Senator Sanders as well, who could not join us tonight. So with that, I would like to reintroduce U.S. Senator Peter Welch for one more word.
You know, it is so moving to have listened to people who went through what they described. It's so painful to hear about the grievous loss they suffered, anxiety about their family, their children, and to see that that has been compounded by a FEMA process that made the trauma of the storm incidental to the reality of the Kafkaesque process they had to go through. A couple of things. Becca and I are in Washington. We're in the minority. But what we heard described here, we could be in Kansas. We could be in Texas. People just like these wonderful Vermonters who testified tonight have counterparts who are first responders, who are kindergarten teachers, who are doctors. And we're in the path of a violent storm that's brought to us by climate change, big oil. So we have common challenges. These are not Republican or Democratic events. And the point that Peter made, and I think it was Ms. Bond in the homeless shelter, it's what really moves me the most. You're talking about a community. You know, there's an ethic in Washington now that is just shocking to, I think, both of us. And that is, if you take the time to help somebody else, you're a sucker. That if you don't cut in line when no one's looking so you can get an edge, you're a fool. And it's the most shocking thing to me, as I think it is to most Vermonters, because we get joy in our life when we can help somebody else. It like means something to us. It's not just that we're helping somebody. In the process of doing it, we're helping ourselves. And that's what's under assault here by a government that is coddling big oil, that a government that is literally canceling projects that have been approved because they're clean energy and it's a threat to the fossil fuel monopoly. So we have our work to do in the righteous work in this wonderful no immunity for big oil. We're all on that. But we're also on trying to make FEMA work. And we had a real battle there. Christine Ohm was the head of FEMA, and she wanted to abolish it. I'm not going to tell you, I shed a lot of tears when she was fired. So we have to make it work, and we have to put trust in local people. And that's the folks in this room. That's you. And we have to make the process be result-oriented. Persons without their house, they're entitled to an answer, yes or no, sooner rather than later. And we can't get hung up on all these cover your butt details. But the other thing that we know, and it came up a few times when somebody mentioned the East Wing, but government really is about priorities. The political process is about each of us having some agency to decide how we allocate resources, how we go about solving shared problems. And Becca and I are being presented right now by your government with a proposal that we add $500 billion to the defense budget. We've never seen that before. And we know about the cuts to healthcare. We know about all the cuts to science. But literally, we're being asked to continue spending $1.5 million on Patriot interceptors, they're going to take down $35,000 drones. And we don't have money for the buyouts. When it was a weather event over which none of us here had any control, and where citizens across this country, Republican and Democrat, are concerned about their children just as we are, that is a choice that is made in the political process. And you know where Becca and Bernie and I stand on that. But I just want to say, your anger about that is righteous anger. It's righteous anger. Because what we have a responsibility to do is accept our own agency and ability to act, to help those neighbors when their house is flooded, to go to the town meetings and speak up for a fair budget, to support our first responders. But in Washington, Becca and Bernie and I have a responsibility to fight for Vermont values. And the biggest Vermont value that holds us together is our sense of community. It's what makes life worth living, but it's what the political process is supposed to enhance, not degrade. So I just want to express to you my enormous appreciation for organizing this event, but for the people who spoke out in such eloquent ways. It inspires me to work with redoubled energy on behalf of Vermont and each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I'd now like to reintroduce Congresswoman Balint.
So Peter speaks my mind on so many points. Just a couple things that I want to say, specifically to Corinne, if you're still here. I was so incredibly moved by, it was a gut punch when you said all 45 families lost their homes. And that you knew that in that moment, you needed to be there as the connector. That wasn't going to happen. I mean, you talked about that wasn't going to happen. Nobody was coming in to do that critically important work of connecting citizens to resources and just information. I mean, that's what we often hear in an emergency. I just want some information at a basic level so that you can alleviate some of that anxiety. So I was so moved by you stepping up in that way in the midst of your own struggles. And Melissa, are you still here? Melissa, in the same way that you were thinking about your employees, knowing that you had a responsibility not just for yourself and your family and this business that your husband has put everything into and that represented his family, but also you were thinking so much about what you could do for your employees. And I know that took an incredible toll on you. But I can tell you those employees are never going to forget you. They're never going to forget that you were there for them and were thinking about their needs, even in the midst of your own struggles. And I just want to acknowledge that because there was so much sacrifice that we saw in Plainfield, in Barre, in Montpelier. I know in Brattleboro, when we got flooded out during Irene and we saw people's homes getting carried downstream, there was so much of a toll that was taken, and there were these incredible angels in the community in the midst of their own trauma that stood up. So, and to everyone who told us their stories tonight, thank you so much. And what Peter said is absolutely right. There is this, there's this sense that if you have compassion, that if you have empathy, that somehow you're a sucker, that you're not a leader. But we know that real leaders show up for their neighbors. Real leaders don't ask who you voted for. Real leaders say, what do you need? How can I help you? And we need so much more of that across the country. And he's right. It isn't just in Vermont. It's in North Carolina. It's in Texas. It's in communities across this country. And it does come down to corporate greed. And it does come down to incredible corruption and graft. There is a pay-to-play system in this country right now, the likes that we have never seen. And I'm a history teacher, and I taught about the Gilded Age. What we're seeing now is nothing we could have ever imagined in a democratic state. We are so committed. The entire delegation is so committed to finding partners wherever we can across the aisle. We are going to continue to do that, but we will never, ever throw over the values that you sent us to Washington to protect. So thank you so much. Really, I'm so glad to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Getting a bit more local now, I'm pleased to introduce State Senator Andrew Perchlik.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all this testimony and for your witness. You can't have healing testimony without witness, so I really appreciate those that just came here to listen. And I attended similar things like this soon after the floods. I live in Plainfield and close to Barre, represent Barre. And I thought this was even more impactful than those that we had right after the flood, because how soon we forget. Not those that were directly affected, but those of us that weren't, that just saw the damage. We move on to other things. So I thought this was even more impactful, because during the immediate aftermath, we were just awash in sorrow and hearing more of it at these testimonies. But waiting a few years, I'm really glad that we did it. So thank you for the organizers for doing this. Very impactful to remind us the tragedy we had. And we can learn from this testimony. We can build back better. We can make our communities more resilient. We can mitigate the damage, but that's only part of it. It reminds me of the story you might have heard of the ancient village on a waterway that kept on having people float down the river that they had to save. And they were like, we got to do something. So they put up a rope because more and more people kept coming down the river. So they got really good at saving these people. And they were really proud of themselves because they had a really good system to save people that were in the river. But then one day an elder from upstream came down. And they were like, hey, look, aren't you glad we keep saving people from upriver where you live? And they were like, no, I'm here because we need help. There's a troll throwing people in the river and you guys are only rescuing them. Well, you need to come up and see what the problem is. And I feel that's the same here. We need to go upstream and see what's causing these floods. And we know what the troll is, and it's burning fossil fuels, and we need to stop it.
Thank you, Senator. All right, I know we're running a bit behind on time, but these conversations are so important, and so we've got just a few more for you. Next up, I am delighted to introduce Barre City Council member Amanda Gustin.
Thank you, everyone. As others before me, I want to thank everyone who shared their story this evening, and also those of you who didn't feel able to share your story tonight, who are here as witnesses, who also experienced the flooding and are maybe having memories this evening. Here in Barre, I often say that everyone in Barre has a flood story. Wherever you were in the city on those nights, you experienced the flood. I was at the same height as the auditorium my house is, and I still get twitchy when it rains hard. So thank you to everyone for coming out this evening. As Jordan said, I have the privilege of serving on Barre City Council, where I represent Ward 2, which is a position I sought out after I had spent that summer doing flood response work, because I could see coming down the pike a future in which Barre's recovery and its flood resilient future were planned without the direct input of those who were most impacted. And that was profoundly upsetting to me and profoundly important to me, that we only move forward with the people who know their community the best, who know their neighborhood the best. And I'm proud to say that we are moving in that direction. I also have to have a shout out. Congresswoman Balint mentioned she's a history teacher. My day job is as an historian. And with that, I feel compelled to say two things. First of all, you're in one of the most historic buildings in Barre that was itself significantly impacted by flooding in 2023. I was on that street outside the next day, and then the mud was up to your knees. The city lost one of its rescue vehicles in that mud that was so badly damaged it had to be junked. And volunteers were coming up the stairs of this basement of the labor hall. If you use the bathroom tonight, you can still see that the drywall is cut back from that flooding still 3 years later. And the second thing I have to say is that flooding is the disaster of Vermont's past. We have numerous flood events on the record, including 1927, which hit Barre and Montpelier profoundly. It is, as we heard tonight, the disaster of Vermont's present. It's something we are experiencing directly every day, and it is the disaster of Vermont's future. It will not stop. It will happen more often, and it will get worse, which is something we live with every single day here in Barre City. And I'm proud to say the city has risen up and fought those challenges, but we need significantly more help. Our city manager spoke eloquently to the profound challenges we face, both as a community and as a municipality, in securing enough funding to do the really big things that we know we need to. So I'm grateful to everyone who came out this evening to make that call for that help. I'm grateful to our congressional delegation who has done great strides in securing that help for us so far. And this is a problem we've gotten ourselves into over decades, and it's going to take decades to come, but we have a good team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gustin. So Senator Watson and Senator Cummings, I'm not entirely sure if either of you would like to offer additional reflections, but I'm giving you the moment now. I defer to you both if you'd like to say anything more. Okay.
Great, thank you. I would just love to reflect for a moment that these stories are so heavy, they're so hard and so painful. And I don't know about you, but it makes me so angry. It gives me a lot of energy. It makes me sad, it makes me frustrated. And I know that when I get in that sort of emotional head state, I have to do something with that energy. And so if you're like me, I would just encourage you to find something to do with that energy, right? Like, I mean, I will probably go cry later, but I might also go for a run. And I might also write out some ideas you all had from your stories. I am feeling inspired because one of the things I was listening for in your stories is how can we do better? What can the state be doing better? Certainly, there are things at the federal level that can be done better, but what can the state be doing better? And so I was taking notes, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be thinking about crafting some legislation based on the stories that I heard tonight. And I want you to know that I'm going to be carrying those stories with me, should I get reelected, into the next session. And I also just want to acknowledge that I think the best ideas for legislation come from people who have lived experience. So I want to encourage you, what can you do with the energy that all of these collective stories are giving you? I think it is so important and therapeutic that we're all here together, that we're here mourning together, lamenting collectively the situations that we have experienced. And I hope that you find something at the end of your jog or your weeping, whatever it is. I hope that you find something productive that you can channel that energy into. What are the next steps? What do we do? Thank you.
It's hot. The seats are getting hard. And I think we're all overwhelmed by the stories we've heard. And it's particularly good that we did hear those stories tonight because we made it through last year. Barre or Montpelier didn't get flooded, even though there was a lot of angst as we got through those early teen days. And hopefully we'll get through it this year. But if you watch the national news, 50% of the stories are on extreme weather. Keep saying, that's all that's happening. That's all the news they're reporting. It's there. And as a state senator, I can't do very much about FEMA, but I do know the frustration. I know the frustration of folks trying to get their buyouts in Montpelier and trying to get their homes raised and how long it took. But as a state senator, what I heard and what I had reinforced is that we are not prepared for these kinds of emergencies. We don't have an early warning system. We don't have an evacuation system. We don't have a system of shelters. So when you're in Montpelier and every road between here and Barre is flooded, you get told, go to Barre. That's nice. And the smaller towns are in even worse shape. We need to come together so that we are prepared. We need to make sure our first responders and we need to do a better job of training our disaster coordinators at a local level so that we can do what Vermont does best, and that is help our neighbors through hard times. And I hope we never lose that ability. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Watson and Senator Cummings, for your reflections. All right, finally, last but certainly not least, I will pass it over to Ethan Hinch, Senior Policy Advisor for Senator Bernie Sanders.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I know the Senator would have liked to be here in person, but I'll be sure to share the stories that we've heard today with him. And on his behalf, I want to thank everyone who testified here today, as well as all the volunteers and town work crews and rescue teams, state and local employees, and just Vermonters for the extraordinary work they did during and after the flooding that we've experienced over the past few years. As we've discussed tonight, these devastating floods that we discussed tonight are directly related to climate change. From flooding across Vermont to the hottest days on record in many parts of the country and the world to wildfires out west, climate change is real and causing devastating damage around the world. And let's be clear, climate change is not an accident. It is the result of burning fossil fuels, and it's the result of the fossil fuels industry's long-standing criminal conspiracy to mislead the American people and to discredit climate science in pursuit of massive profits. The crisis of climate change is being made enormously worse by the actions of President Trump, who has taken or proposed more than 500 actions that promote fossil fuels, threaten clean air, water, public lands, and environmental protections. That may make sense to the fossil fuel industry that spent $450 million to elect President Trump. It does not make sense to Senator Sanders. What we need to do instead is work together as a state, as a nation, and a planet to aggressively move away from fossil fuels and transition to energy efficiency and sustainable sources of power. When we do that, we reduce carbon emissions, cut utility bills, and create millions of good jobs. We also need to ensure that the costs of this necessary transition are borne by the parties responsible for driving climate change and for lying about the negative impacts of the products. That's why the Senator was pleased to see Vermont become the first state in the nation to pass a climate superfund law to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable for the crisis of climate change. The Senator will continue the fight in Washington with his colleagues to fight for bold action to address climate change and take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry. Thank you again to everyone who testified here today. We've got to keep fighting for a healthy and habitable planet for future generations, with or without the help of Donald Trump and his friends in big oil. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. This concludes tonight's Extreme Weather People's Hearing. We're so grateful to have had you here today, and thank you for showing up and supporting our community members as we respond to these extreme weather events impacting our loved ones.